And I want to close business at this time. Petey? Our first speaker up is Robert Talton, please. Tonight, Jay Ward has kindly agreed to be our moderator, and Buck Kelsey is going to be our timekeeper, and Jay will take over at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Appreciate it. As you all know and can see, we have quite a wonderful group of people here. We have 18 candidates that have signed up to be here with us tonight. And so I would like to explain the rules, exactly how the forum is going to follow through with each candidate. And they have already received a letter and probably already know the rules and regulations, but I want all of y'all so that we're all together on the same type of page. Each candidate will be given up to 3 minutes for his or her personal introduction. After each candidate for that office has made his or her introduction comments, questions will be allowed from the floor. And those questions will be on a time limit also. Questions may be directed to one candidate or to all. Question and answer will be limited to 2 minutes per candidate. Following the Q&A, candidates will each be given 1 minute for a summary or a rebuttal. And we will go accordingly and I'm going to give you an example. We will start with the candidates for Supreme Court. And to give you an idea, we have 3 people here that will be candidates for the Supreme Court, and there are 4 candidates, whereas down the line we have, it varies, but we have just about every place covered. So at this time we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Talton. Oh, yes, excuse me. He had a good point. Yeah, we do have a timekeeper, and it's like Patricia said, Buck Kelsey, if you will stand up in the back, and he will have 2 sheets of paper. One will be, he will hold up and show you that you have 1 minute left. That's the yellow one. And then at that time, when you have finished that, conclude your time limit, then he'll hold up the red, and that will be your 3 minutes or whatever we're looking at. That means stop. Okay.
Guys, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Inman, for inviting us here and allowing us to visit. Guys, I'd like to start with a little quote. I'm gonna read it. This is a quote from a guy named Jeff Foxworthy, which I think is appropriate. If you can get arrested for hunting or fishing without a license, but not for entering and remaining in the country illegally, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots. Guys, I grew up in Pasadena, Texas. I've lived in the area most of my life. My wife and I will be celebrating our 44th wedding anniversary tomorrow. I have 2 children and 5 grandchildren, and I'm an active deacon at Sagemont Church in Houston, Texas. I served as a police officer in the city of Pasadena. I've served as assistant city attorney. I've served as city attorneys. I've practiced law for 37 years in various areas. I've also been a municipal court judge. I hear some are saying that I've never been a judge, but I have twice. I was elected to the House of Representatives for 16 years, where I served as chairman of urban affairs and served on redistricting 2 times and served my last 2 sessions in civil practices and remedies. That's the ones that help write the laws regarding our civil law. We need a court. The reason I'm running, you say, why am I running at this time in my life? Guys, we need a court that is fair, impartial, and independent, and that they believe in the trial by jury, they believe the rule of law, and they believe in our Constitution. Any time that a court overturns 74% of the cases that reach them that were tried, that are trials by jury, then we've got a serious problem. Most of the decisions of this Supreme Court has favored the big corporations and the big government. All you have to do is read the decisions. We need to elect judges that apply the law and have the ability and the will to do the right thing. I'd like to leave you with this. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. That's Proverbs 29:2. The people are groaning. Thank you.
Questions will come when everybody's had their turn. Okay, Jeff Brown.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Brown. I'm the newest judge on the Texas Supreme Court. I occupy place 6 on the court. I was appointed there last fall by Governor Perry to fill a vacancy. The way our Constitution works, the governor appoints when there's a vacancy, and then that appointee has to stand for election at the next general election, which I am now doing now, and I'm proud to be here tonight speaking to you. I believe in a loving God, the rule of law, the U.S. Constitution, American exceptionalism, and traditional Texas values. Just a couple of months ago, I stood on the floor of the House of Representatives in Austin, laid my hand on Sam Houston's Bible, and my hero, Justice Antonin Scalia of the U.S. Supreme Court, administered the oath of office to me. I swore to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state. I am proud to do that every day as a Supreme Court Justice. I am proud that I've been doing that every day for my 12-year career as a judge. I served 6 years as a district judge and 6 years on the Court of Appeals before Governor Perry appointed me to this bench. But my respect for the rule of law began at a much earlier age. My father was a police officer for 35 years, and in our home, public service and respect for law and order were the order of the day. I became an Eagle Scout at the age of 15. I'm an active Boy Scout volunteer. Now my sons are both on the trail to Eagle, and it's a very important part of my life. My first year out of law school, I was honored to serve as a law clerk on the Supreme Court of Texas for a brand new, young Supreme Court judge named Greg Abbott. I'm very proud to be back at the court as a justice now, and I share the philosophy that Judge Abbott took to the court when he went there so many years ago. I believe that judges should interpret the law. Judges are not to make the law. Judges are not to legislate from the bench. When we interpret statutes, contracts, and constitutional provisions, the best thing to do is to stick close to the text of those statutes, contracts, and constitutional provisions, because that's how you know the original intent of the folks who drafted those documents. It's very important to me. It's the kind of judge that I am every day and the kind of judge that I will continue to be for you. Place 6 on the Texas Supreme Court, Jeff Brown. Thank you very much.
Our next candidate is Mr. Joe Poole.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for having us here tonight and for giving us this opportunity to talk to you. We all know the Llano Tea Party is very important and it is the gateway to further and greater political activity in the state of Texas. But I don't know of any Tea Party candidate that's been appointed to a statewide office. And I don't think you do either. And so I'm here to tell you that I'm Joe Poole. I'm running for Supreme Court, place 6. My life began at conception. my life will end waiting online for a response from healthcare.gov. This is a very important election, and it's because your constitutional rights are being eroded as we're sitting here enjoying some good barbecue. And what I mean by that is Article 1, Section 15 of our Texas Constitution. The right of trial by jury shall remain inviolate. Inviolate, unviolated. Since the year 2000, 74% of all jury verdicts reviewed by the Texas Supreme Court have been overturned, reversed, rendered, nada. That's not constitutional, that's not conservative, and under Romans 13 may not even be Christian. I'm here to tell you that the only way electing judges works is if we honor the right of trial by jury. Otherwise, we have lawsuit reform groups that give money to not just legislative races, but judicial races. And we all remember from our civics class what's wrong with the branches of government interfering with the other branches, such as appointing judges when they should be elected and giving money for legislative lawsuit reform to judicial candidates. It's not right, and it's got to stop. I would like for you to support me at standwithpool.com and poolfortexas.com. We have some things going on. We've challenged the petition of our opponent, and it's because there's a Democrat in the race, and there's some improprieties in the petitioning that could be used as a means of getting rid of the candidate by the Democrats in the fall. And so it's important that we continue this process and that we continue uphold our constitutional rights and uphold the oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend our constitutions of this state and of the United States. So help us God. Thank you. Question time.
If you have questions for the candidates, can you make your way to the back mic, please? Questions for the candidates to the back mic, please.
Yes, if you have a question, we had a microphone back there in the back that you would be able to speak at. And just to remind you that when we start, this is our first round for the evening, so that the questions that will be proposed, there will be 6 minutes in which questions can be given and answered. They will be directed, your question should be directed directly to the individual candidate or to all three. Okay, at this time I will entertain the first question and we'll start the time.
John Rowland, candidate for U.S. Senate. If elected, are you prepared to work to alter the rules of judicial procedure such that all issues of law are argued to the jury, except for perhaps for argument on admission of evidence that cannot be made without disclosing the evidence improperly? This is intended to make sure that the jury always hears all legal arguments and is not being asked to render a verdict where the arguments are kept from them.
What I think happens now, the juries are the arbiter of facts, and the law is given to them by the judge, and they apply that. And the way that it's supposed to work now, your Court of Appeals should be your final arbiter of the facts, and then the Supreme Court see if there's any violations of the law. That's something that I would look at. What I am prepared to do procedurally would be to look at the rules of civil procedure that have been coming out of the Supreme Court. Basically what I see is that it is basically putting the sole practitioner out of business. We have just had e-filing going in all over the state of Texas. And I will tell you there will be no more pro se, and it's going to be expensive for any sole practitioner or any individual to get legal representation. What I see that as an affront to our right to seek justice in our court system.
Okay, that was just directed to one.
Okay.
Okay, do we have you'll have a chance for a rebuttal at the end also, 1 minute on that. So, the next question, please, goes to where?
I have two questions, one for Jim Brown. I wonder, what did you mean by American exceptionalism?
Well, what I mean is that America is a special place in the world. That I believe that we have God-given resources here that make America a special place. And our system of laws is a good example of that. We're the first real strong democracy in the world. We are the oldest democracy right now, and the power here is in the hands of the people. And that's what makes America an exceptional place. And I firmly believe in that.
And then I had one for Joe Poole. Would you uphold Rick Perry's law against abortion when the Supreme Court has held that the right to abortion is a constitutional right?
Well, the biggest faux pas in judicial activism, or in the biggest judicial activist case, of course, is Roe v. Wade, with no basis in the law for any of the holdings in that case. And so the answer is that I'm in favor of pro-life whenever I can get it and see it. And as I said before, my life began at conception, and I firmly believe that.
Okay, is there any other questions? If not, we will let the candidates have 1 minute for their closing and or rebuttal or whatever they wish to do in 1 minute. Okay?
Guys, it's important the type of people that you elect. One of the things when I was in the House, and I've got one of my former colleagues here, Tommy Merritt, will tell you that the thing that I tried to do was to do the right thing, regardless of the cost to you, whether it's big money guys or whatever. I was also known as a point of order guy. I wasn't afraid to kill a bad bill. And that's what I did. I did that for the 16 years that I was there. I was a rules person. And I understand that. And I will tell you, America is an exceptional nation. But our God-given rights come from God. They don't come from the government. And what we've got now is coming from the government. And it's not from God. And we, the people, as such, need to take it back over. We need to elect people that understand that our rights came from God, not from some government that we have. And the government needs to be made up of we, the people, and not big business or big government. Thank you.
Well, life came up as a topic, and I'd like to say that I'm very proud to say that I have been endorsed by Texas Right to Life PAC in this race. I serve on the leadership circle of Texas Alliance for Life, and I'm on the advisory board of an organization in Houston called Lifehouse, which is a Christian maternity home for young women who are not married, who are pregnant, but who have decided to keep their babies. And it's a very important ministry to me. That is a money where your mouth is pro-life organization. They don't just tell women that you shouldn't get abortions. They help women who have decided not to get abortions. It's a very important issue for me. My name is Jeff Brown. I'm running for election to place 6, the place I currently hold on the Texas Supreme Court, and I would very much like to have your vote. Thank you.
I'd like to let y'all know that there's only one difference, really, between us and the rest of the world. Between us and the mediocrity that you can find in the rest of the world. There's the exceptionalism of the United States, and one of the reasons for that, from the 1800s to 2000, is your right to a civil jury trial. This Constitution we have is genius. We don't want, and our military heroes don't want to come home and find out that they've been defending our Constitution abroad, and they come home to find out it's been eroded by 74% overturning. That's just sick. It's despicable. We can't accept it anymore. We got to do something. We've got to maintain our constitutions through our sacrifices, and y'all need to start sacrificing now, and let's get something done about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Just to let you all know, there are 4 candidates for the Supreme Court, and 3 out of the 4 showed up here in Llano, Texas. I think we ought to give them a big hand. Okay. Oh, yeah, yes. Petey is going to hold up a sign, and if you are a candidate in the position that she's holding the sign up for, she wants you to come up here and take a nice seat. It's not a jury seat, it's just a seat that you can come in and sit at. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start now with the criminal appeals, and I believe that we have the 4 candidates here. So we will go ahead and start with Mr. Bert Richardson.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bert Richardson. I'm a candidate for place 3 on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Can you hear me? Louder? Closer? Okay. My name is Bert Richardson. I'm a candidate for place 3 on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. I'm a senior judge from San Antonio. I've been a judge for the last 14 years in the state of Texas. In the last 5 years, I've worked in 40 counties. I know what the justice system is like in the state of Texas. Let me give you a little bit of my background. I don't have an opponent here tonight, and I'd like to tell you what the Court of Criminal Appeals does, because most people don't know. I was in Nacogdoches a month ago, and I had a group of college students come in, college Republicans, and I went up and asked them, do you guys know what the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is? I got one taker on that. His dad was a lawyer, and he said, I think they do traffic tickets. They don't do traffic tickets. The Court of Criminal Appeals is kind of the stepchild of the Texas Supreme Court. Texas has 2 high courts. They have the Texas Supreme Court, and that court handles civil cases. The Court of Criminal Appeals handles criminal cases. The judges on that court write legal opinions that interpret the statutes and the Constitution of our state. As I tell people who don't know anything about the court, it determines life, liberty, and death in this state, literally. It's the court where all death penalty cases go for the first time, and it's the court that interprets all of the criminal laws in this state, and hopefully they interpret those consistent with the legislative intent when they are passed. My background is I'm from San Antonio. I was raised in a military family. I've been married for 29 years. My wife is here tonight. We were both raised in families where public service was extremely important. Both of our fathers have passed away. They were both veterans of multiple wars. They were both career Air Force pilots. My nephew just got back from Afghanistan, and my brother is in Afghanistan, I think, for the 25th time in his career. I had bad eyes at the wrong time in my life, so I had chose another path of public service. I was a state and federal prosecutor in San Antonio for many years before I was appointed to the bench by George Bush. I am board certified in criminal law. I have done appellate law for several years in my career. I have tried many, many capital cases. I've been a college and law professor for the last 10 years. I'm qualified for this bench. And when you go to the polls, remember, the Court of Criminal Appeals is the high court in the state for criminal cases. It's an important court. It decides life, liberty, and death for the citizens of this state. Vote for the most qualified candidate. I'm running for place 3, and my name is Bert Richardson. Thank you very much.
Not as tall as Bert. My name is Kevin Yeary, and I'm running for place 4 on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and I want to tell you I'm humbled and honored to be here tonight to introduce myself to you. I like to say that we make our plans for our lives, and the good Lord makes His plans for us. And I know for a fact, because He's made His plans for my life, and that's what's brought me here today before you. Because I graduated from law school as a young bright-eyed, bushy-tailed lawyer, thinking I was going to be a civil litigator and make a ton of money. That was my plan. I had a job with a civil firm lined up, and I got a call from a judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals in 1991 asking me to come help him draft opinions on the court as his briefing attorney. And the lawyers in the civil firm said, Kevin, that's an honor. You need to take that job. And when you're done, you come back and you work with us. And that's exactly what I did. I went to Austin. I worked at the Court of Criminal Appeals for a year, and I got that tremendous, excellent experience of working with those terribly great judges on that court, deciding the most important cases in criminal law in Texas. And I went back to San Antonio and became a civil litigator, and I did that for 3 years. And while I was there, I did criminal defense work. Because of the experience I'd had at the court, people brought me some criminal work to do. And I did some appeals for criminal defendants, and in one of those cases, I was very honored to be able to help a wrongfully convicted lady who was convicted of theft in a bench trial in a court in Bexar County get that conviction overturned because it was an incorrect conviction. Even the prosecutor who tried the case agreed with us on that. She said she had to try it because she had a persistent alleged victim in the case, and so they never thought the judge would say guilty, but we were able to take it to the Court of Criminal Appeals, the Court of Appeals, and get it overturned. I left practice, civil practice though, because I knew my heart was called to appellate work. And appellate work is what goes on at the Court of Criminal Appeals. It's different than what happens in trial courts. In trial courts, you try cases to juries, and you try to persuade those people that are just like you and me about what the facts are in a case. At the Court of Appeals level, you really have to have special skills at interpreting the Constitution and the laws of the state so that you don't overturn something that the legislature has lawfully passed. We want our legislatures passing the law. We don't want the courts doing it for us. We want our judges to enforce the law as it's written. So anyway, I left that and I went to become a prosecutor in Dallas County, where I did appellate work exclusively for that office. And I did that until I decided to get married. I moved to Houston, where my wife, who's a pediatrician, was in training. We had our first child while she was there. I was working for the Harris County DA's office, and for the last 15 years I've been an appellate prosecutor in Bexar County. I've got 4 daughters, a wife who's a practicing pediatrician, and I'm ready for the job at the Court of Criminal Appeals. I've had every kind of case you can imagine, over 400 appeals. I've argued at the court multiple times. I've argued at the Supreme Court of Texas. I've filed briefs in the United States Supreme Court, and I teach prosecutors and criminal and law enforcement officers, and I teach victims advocates, and I'm ready to do the job. I just need you to send me there. Thank you for hearing me.
Well, thanks again for the great meal, although we did pay for it, but seriously, it was very good. And thank you for having us here. I know a fair number of you. You know a lot of my background. For those that don't, I will tell you I was born in Borger, Texas, lived in Texas my entire life. And I went to law school, well, college and law school at Baylor. I now actually twice a year conduct a jury selection seminar for the Baylor Practice Court Program. And I likewise have a very varied background. I have prosecuted cases, I have defended cases, and I've prosecuted murder cases, and I have prosecuted misdemeanor cases. I have defended all kinds of cases, but I've also done a fair amount of civil litigation, which, why would that be relevant? Because it gives a breadth and depth of knowledge. And I have tried nearly 100 jury trials, most of them criminal. And I differ a little bit with some of the other speakers, because even though criminal law is what the Court of Criminal Appeals does and all that it does, that trial experience is critical, because it is not tried in a vacuum, and a trial judge has to apply the law to that trial. I know better than anyone else in this race how those decisions affect the day-to-day practice of law in the trial courts. And some of our local officials know that the trial is about more than the facts. There are decisions of law made in every trial. I would say literally, and I think some of you out here will agree with me, Mr. McAfee, that, for example, that legal matters come up in every trial almost on a half-hourly basis. The trial judge makes a decision on the law. Those are the things upon which the appeal is based, and I have handled a number of appeals. I've been able to reverse cases myself. I've also lost appeals. I have argued the law from both sides. And as a personal background, I will tell you that I was, because of age and my father's lack of enthusiasm about his draftee status, he encouraged me not to join the military. However, my son is a sergeant, staff sergeant in the Army in San Antonio, and my stepson is in the Coast Guard in Seattle, and I have numerous veterans, and my brother has been a police officer for over 20 years, and we've had some very spirited discussions, but I understand the issues and I can see both sides, and that's what this court needs, is someone who will not be in tune to one side or the other, but can see both sides. I ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all very much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak with you. My name is David Newell, and I am running for Court of Criminal Appeals, Place 9. I'm the only one here running for that position here tonight. I'm not running against any of the folks up here. Just to give you a little bit of background, I was not born in Texas. I was born in the Bethesda Naval Hospital because my dad was a Navy man, and he graduated from the Naval Academy in 1964 when ships were made of wood and men were made of steel. And he raised me to be a very strong conservative Republican, but I grew up in Fort Bend, just outside of Houston, in Sugar Land. And I was never going to actually be, I'm currently a prosecutor, but I was never going to be a lawyer. My original idea was that I was going to be a writer. I used to write for fun all the time. I would write really bad stories, really horrible stories. And I went to college, and I went there to get a degree in English so that I could further this goal. And then something happened, and Kevin mentioned that the Lord has plans for you, and I could not see what his plans were, but he had plans for me because unfortunately a very good friend of mine was sexually assaulted, and I did not know how to help her. I didn't know what to do. And so I volunteered at the Houston Area Women's Center, and I answered the rape crisis hotline, and that's what I did. And I got to hear so many women in crisis. I learned so many different horrible stories. I heard so many different horrible stories. I realized that I wasn't going to be making a difference by writing really bad stories. So I went to law school to become a prosecutor, and I went to the University of Texas School of Law. But I used my writing background to teach legal writing there and teach legal research. And that's pretty much how I ended up getting really involved in doing criminal appeals. Now, I got out of law school, I went back to Fort Bend, I got to work at the Fort Bend County DA's office writing appeals as an intern. But when they hired me on, I did trials, I did misdemeanors, I did felonies. But really my first love was criminal appeals. And so I worked, I've done every kind of criminal appeal there. I've done death penalty appeals, I've done traffic appeals, I've done any kind of name it. I'm now board certified in criminal law and criminal appellate law. I'm now widely regarded as one of the leading experts on the Court of Criminal Appeals as I speak on the Court of Criminal Appeals to the State Bar, for the State Bar's Advanced Criminal Law course. I've been doing that since 2007. I recently won an award, the Seacrest Marshall Award, for doing just that. The Texas lawyer often calls me when they want to know what the significant decisions are from the Court of Criminal Appeals. That's why I think I'm the most qualified person for this job, and I would ask you to remember David Newell for Place 9. Thank you very much.
Okay, y'all come on up here.
Okay, we are now opening for questions from each individual, if you would like that, or from all four at this particular time. And if you'll go forward and go over to the mic, we'll go on. We have 8 minutes in which to make sure that your question is answered. Okay, Bill. Oh, okay.
Hi, this question is for all four of you. How do you feel about the death penalty?
It's the law in the state, and it's been held to be constitutional.
Amen.
Amen.
I'm all for it, and I think it's definitely appropriate. I think it's very important to make sure that we enforce it, but only on guilty people. And that's what this court does, is determine that. But there is absolutely no question that it is the law of this state and should be enforced.
Something I didn't tell you when I was speaking to you before is I'm a Catholic, and I adhere to the teachings of the Catholic Church. And many of you may not have read the Catechism, but I have. And the Catechism says that it does not exclude the death penalty. And I looked at that hard before I became a prosecutor. In fact, it said that governments have a duty to protect themselves, the people of the government, against people who will harm them. And as a prosecutor, that's what I believe, and that's exactly the ethical approach that I brought to every capital case I've worked on, and that's my answer. Thank you.
I would agree with everything that everyone has said here. It is definitely constitutional. It's certainly the law of the land. I would add, though, there are definitely vehicles for the court to address questions of actual innocence to make sure we get the right guy. But having done a lot of death penalty, seen a lot of death penalty cases, I can assure you that the process that you go through in order to actually carry out an execution is quite lengthy and weeds out. So we are pretty kind of confident that these guys are good for the trip. So.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to this microphone. Next question, please.
John Rowland, Constitution.org.
Who are you?
What might you do to remove impediments to citizens taking cases directly to grand juries, especially in cases of official misconduct?
And who, too, is your question addressed?
All of them.
All four, okay?
I'll go. All right, so the issue is whether citizens can go directly to the grand jury. One of the first answer I have is the grand jury is made up of citizens, okay? Citizens on the grand jury have authority to investigate cases, sometimes even if the DA doesn't want them to. And that's why we have a grand jury, okay? So citizens have power through the grand jury, and that's my answer.
Well, I agree that the grand jury is a body of citizens, and every citizen has a right to make a complaint and have it investigated. There's no legal impediment to that.
But there are practical impediments.
Yes, there are. That is the practical impediments come from the way in which the grand jury is accessed. However, everybody who is on the grand jury, that becomes a public matter, or a matter of public knowledge. And access to the grand jury, as a practical matter, typically is through a prosecution office. However, there are also avenues by which citizens can make those complaints to different authorities.
It happens in the state, if that's your concern, that it doesn't happen. And I'm involved in cases where it does happen, where citizens make the complaint and it goes to a grand jury. So the mechanism is there. Sometimes the squeaky wheel has to get the grease to get there. And if you're not happy with how it works in the area that you live, then your recourse may be at the ballot with whoever the DA is, if he's preventing you from getting access to the grand jury.
What they said.
Okay, if that's the case, Mr. Newell, we'll just start with you for your 1 minute conclusion.
Thank you again for having me. I do appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. I would just hope that you check me out. My website is newellforjudge.com. Find me on Facebook. Like me on Facebook. I need all the help I can get because I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would be up here running for the highest court in Texas for criminal cases. I certainly think I'm very qualified, but I couldn't get more grassroots. It's me and my wife and my folks, and we're just driving all over the place on a statewide race. So I need all the help we can get, and I truly do believe that we need good, qualified people up on the court, and I think that's why I'm running. I've never sought politics. I've never done that. But I felt that given that we have 3 different openings and we're going to have more openings in the future, we need to make sure we have people that know the law, know the court's jurisprudence, and can be humble enough to make sure to do what's best for the Constitution. Thank you very much. David Newell, Place 9.
Also, thank you very much. The reason I'm running for this position, this judgeship, is because I really think that the state, all of us want a judiciary, a court system that operates the way that we all were taught in our civics classes, the way we were taught by our parents, that the courts were supposed to work. Nobody has an agenda, nobody has their thumb on the scale. The rules are applied, and the final answer to any of these legal questions is ultimately what is constitutional, and did what the legislature pass that constitutional muster, and was the trial conducted in accordance with the law, with no agenda other than a fair and impartial administration of justice. That same thing we've always been taught and always hoped we would have, that I think we all feel like has started to erode. I would ask for your vote for place 4. Thank you.
Your name?
Richard Davis.
I just want to remind everybody, it's the high court in the state. It requires qualified candidates that need to be elected. I have that background. I've been a lawyer for over 25 years. I've done the very cases that the Court of Criminal Appeals handles. The question was, what do you think about the death penalty? I've been involved in over 20 capital cases in my career. Over 10 of those have been death penalty cases. But it's also important that the judges on that court have the courage to do the right thing. And sometimes the wrong thing happens in trials. And sometimes the judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals have to step up to the plate and do the right thing. And all you have to do is just look about 30, 45 minutes east of here and ring up Michael Morton and ask him what it was like to sit in prison for 25 years for not killing somebody that he was convicted of killing. So it requires judges who have qualifications, experience. My name is Bert Richardson. I'm running for place 3. I don't have an opponent here tonight. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Yeary. I'm running for place 4 on the Court of Criminal Appeals. I began my career there 22 years ago as a briefing attorney. I've been a defense attorney. For the last 18 years, I've proudly represented the people of this state as a prosecutor in some of the 3 of the biggest metropolitan areas of this state. You name the kind of criminal case that it is, and I have seen it, and I have worked on it, and my fingerprints have been on it. And I promise you, I've done my best the entire time to be the most ethical, right-thinking, doing the right thing lawyer that I could be during that entire time. And I feel called to run for the court because the court has vacancies coming up, and we need people on the court who understand the history of that court, where it came from, where it is today, and where it needs to go in the future. And I want to say I am that person. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a citizen of the state of Texas. I'm a 7th generation Texan. My family came to Texas from Ireland and landed over by in a place called Capano, which is close to Galveston, between Galveston and Corpus Christi, and we've been here ever since. I grew up in Laredo. I played as a kid, I'm sorry, I've gone too long. I played in the Frio River, and please vote for me, Kevin Yeary, place 4, Court of Criminal Appeals. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of y'all to let you know that there was 6 candidates for criminal appeals, and 4 of them are here tonight. Okay? Thank you. We will now have Mr. Mark Miller for Railroad Commissioner.
Good evening. My name is Mark Miller, and I'm a Libertarian candidate for Railroad Commissioner, and I'm not a lawyer. For those of us that work in the oil and gas business, we know a lot about the Railroad Commission. Many Texans, however, may not be aware that the Railroad Commission, though initially targeted railroads when it was put into place in 1891, no longer regulates railroads at all, but is the primary state regulatory agency for the oil and gas business, a business that's about 25% of the state's economy, something very important to the state of Texas. I'm a petroleum engineer. I started my career over 40 years ago in California, working for a major oil company. Went back to graduate school and got a PhD, and returned to my Texas roots to teach petroleum engineering at the University of Texas for about 18 years. I currently have a small software company that produces software for the oil and gas business. There's not much time tonight to talk about a lot of issues, but a couple things I would like to bring to light that I think are very important with regard to the Railroad Commission. The first is transparency. The Railroad Commission regulates an industry that is pretty narrow and also very prosperous. And this causes a lot of Texans to worry that the Commission and the Commissioners have gotten maybe just a little too cozy with the industry that they regulate. In the last Sunset Commission report to the legislature, there were some things that were recommended that would have required some additional transparency of the commission to make sure that they recused themselves appropriately from cases and didn't inappropriately accept campaign donations as a springboard to higher office. And of course, the other issue for the Railroad Commission is regulation. It is a regulatory agency. All right, it is intended to carry out the will of the legislature. But it needs to do so in a way that is both simple and straightforward so that ordinary citizens can understand those regulations and that small companies are able to understand those regulations adequately. The big companies, the Exxons and Mobils and the BPs, they have teams of lawyers and things that can take care of that. The smaller companies are the ones that have difficulty with those regulations. Some of the regulations have been in play for decades and need a thorough review. I think you would agree with me that what's needed at some place like the Railroad Commission is people that are competent, people that are not seeking higher office, people that understand small business and can adequately protect the rights and liberties of all Texans. Thank you.
Okay, we will now have time for, is there any questions of Mr. Miller? Bill?
I just happen to have one. How would you balance the use of the existing energy sources with the development of alternative energy sources in Texas?
Well, I'm not sure that's the job of the Railroad Commission. The Railroad Commission, first of all, has no regular authority over alternative sources. The Railroad Commission only has authority over oil and gas operations. And I would see no reason why we should diminish any of the oil and gas operations, but I see no reason why the Railroad Commission even would need to be involved in the alternative.
Okay, is there any other questions of Mr. Miller? Okay, you will have 1 minute for your conclusion.
Jay.
Oh, just a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't see you walk up, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. What can the Railroad Commission do to bring about new technologies to help the Texas economy?
Get out of the way. Government has been a very poor source of new technologies. And I'll address that a little bit more in my closing statements, but I really do believe it's to get out of the way.
Okay, we'll let him continue. 1 minute.
All right, for my closing remarks, it's unfortunate that the other candidates for Railroad Commission are not here to talk to you tonight. I'm the only one. But if they were here, I'm sure we would have heard a lot about keeping the EPA from crossing the Red River and about energy independence. Here's how I feel on both of those issues. As far as the EPA is concerned, the best thing the Railroad Commission can do is to do its job competently and efficiently. And I'll leave it to the lawyers and the politicians to figure out what to do about the legal matters. But my job as Railroad Commissioner would be to make sure things run smoothly. As far as energy independence is concerned, the only reason we are currently talking about energy independence is because of the shale revolution. Government had nothing to do with that. The Railroad Commission had nothing to do with that. That was small business operating in an environment in which there is privately held land. That system needs to continue. The Railroad Commission needs to continue to make sure that that system works for Texas and all Texans.
Thank you very much. Incidentally, he said that he was the only candidate here, and there are 7 positions for a Railroad Commissioner. Okay, we will now have Agricultural Commissioner, and Tommy Merritt is right here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to set my own timer. I don't know if I'll ever look down at it, but I'm going to set it. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I want to thank Liz and Donna as we spoke to these individuals about coming. They certainly encouraged us to come and attend, and if we attended, most of us would get your vote. So Liz, thank you for that suggestion. But I am from Kilgore. I grew up in the Kilgore oil field. heard the gentleman running for the Railroad Commission. He's absolutely right. A lot of offices have been used for stepping stones. I'm running for Agriculture Commissioner because I want to serve 2 terms. If you allow me to get elected to the 2nd term, I would serve that. But after that, I'm going home. I want to do a good job for you. I want to be the spokesman. The people in Texas have not had a spokesman when you talk about water resources, water conservation, but in particular tonight I want to talk to you about appraisal reform. I have had bills, and Robert Talton and I had worked very closely about trying to control the cost of appraisal. When we were in the legislature, I served 7 terms, and one of my biggest thrusts was to try to get under control an antiquated PVTO bill. And we are spending over $250 million a year appraising property, and the comptroller certifies that we're at 98% maximum value. So would you spend $250 million a year looking for 2% increase? It doesn't make sense. And these appraisal districts are out of control. We've leveled the playing field on appraisal, and now we need to get the appraisal district out of the business of messing with us on our private property. And as your representative in the agriculture department, I feel like I will be closer to the ground, listening to you about trying to control appraisal, to get our water resources, to spend the money prudently, to protect our border. I'm a former federal law enforcement officer, had the largest LSD case made in Louisiana, the largest heroin case made in Mississippi. Now that was 40 years ago. It wasn't a lot, but it was still the largest cases when I worked in that. I want to compliment all these candidates for coming. They've driven long ways. I want to thank the gentleman for the prayer. As we listen to the prayers, you pray for us to have wisdom, you pray for our safety, and you pray for our families, because we were all worried, and we all have to get home, and we worry about whether we're doing a good job for our families. My mother's 96. She saw my political photo. She told my brother I was too fat and I need to lose weight. So, I'm trying to keep my mother happy. And if I'm lucky enough to win this election, I want to go home and be skinny. So I'm working on that. Thank y'all very much, and Happy New Year, and God bless you.
Okay, if there's any questions of Mr. Merritt, now is the time. Please, sir.
I have a question, Mr. Merritt. The Department of Agriculture regulates much more than, involved more than agriculture. Would you speak to some of that for me, please?
Well, let me just say this. What I know is that the Department of Agriculture does not regulate mad cow disease, nor does the Department of Agriculture monitor food safety. But what does happen in the Department of Agriculture, probably one of the most important parts, was probably designed by our founding fathers. And it was in Proverbs 11, verse 1. The Lord abhors dishonest scales, but accurate weights are his delight. And the Texas Department of Agriculture goes to all of the gas pumps and goes to all the weights and measures in the grocery stores to make sure that the Lord's word is taken care of. And I'll make sure that happens also.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any more questions? Okay, you do have a minute for conclusion.
Well, I would like to conclude that there are some great people running for Texas Agriculture Commission. I'm the most qualified. I believe that the previous agriculture commissioners had legislative experience. I think that you need to hit the ground running with that you need to work with the members. I will grant you that Robert Talton stood up for what he was right, and he and I stood up for what we felt like was right together. You pray every day for wisdom as you on the campaign road. When you look around about what Texas is going to be like, every 10 years we're adding a population the size of Houston. Getting the message to the I-35 corridor, what rural Texas is about, what does a John Deere tractor cost, on technical vocation, technical education. I want to add a provision that all these children in technical vocational learn that working on a farm or a ranch is a good job to have. Amen. We want those kids, because I told the Department of Education, your mission statement is to create a taxpayer. I don't care how much taxes they're paying, but tell them when they get the education, they need to pay taxes. And then, so thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Jay, I'm back here behind you.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Mr.
President.
Brown, I have your telephone, but I don't know which Mr. Brown.
Over here. That's mine. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue, and I would like to say that there are 10 candidates for the Agriculture Commissioner, and he was the only one that had time to come to Llano, so.
All right.
Okay, we're now going into the Land Commissioner, and Mr. Watts, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am David Watts, conservative Republican running for Texas Land Commissioner. My background is 22 years of business and technology and human resources type consulting. I am not an attorney. I am a business leader. It occurred to me that the kind of things companies are hiring me for all the time is exactly what our state executive agencies need. They need to get better, get more efficient, and that's the job I'm in every day. As an authentic conservative, I believe that we must aggressively restrain the role of government, or government will aggressively restrain us. And so it is our job to restrain government. I want to make sure the General Land Office is adhering strictly to its constitutional work. And so that's very key at the outset. Now, most of us don't know much about what the Land Commissioner does. Job number one is to manage Texas public land, about 13 million acres, and make money. Isn't that a nice job? I like to tease the other fellows running for statewide office. You fellows want to spend it. I want to make it. That's the job of the Land Commissioner, is to make money for education. And the money made flows straight to public education. Now here's an example, though, of how we need to be on offense as conservatives, not just be content to play defense. Did you know that if folks cross the border, I don't care if they come from Mexico or wherever they come from, if they can get here with their non-citizen children, do you know that by a Supreme Court decision in 1982 called Plyler v. Doe, you must pay for their K-12 education? That costs Texas taxpayers $1 billion a year. That's been going on since 1982. The Land Commissioner needs to take a bold role to work with the legislature, refocus funding of education on Texas children. Texas land, Texas revenue, Texas children. That's the right approach. If we can get a legislature to do that and the governor to sign it, then we'll fight that back to the Supreme Court, and this time we'll win. And that's key, and that's how we go on offense. Part of the work of the Land Commissioner is also to help preserve Texas history. We have the Alamo because of the work of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. And we owe them an immeasurable debt for 105 years worth of faithful service. A few years ago, though, because of concerns about some irregularities or concerns of leadership at the top, the state took away custodianship from the DRT. That was wrong. That is a typical government response. Let private citizens mess up and we're ready to crush you. I'll work with the legislature to define a framework where we can restore custodianship of the Alamo to the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. You may have heard of the Alamo in the news even recently. The folks in San Antonio are working to have the Alamo listed as a UN World Heritage Site, if you can believe that. I'll do everything I can to stop that sort of nonsense. We do not need any UN influence in the management of the Alamo. There is no problem down there with the Alamo that requires the UN. Texans can handle it. Thank you so much, David Watts.
Are there any questions at this time of Mr. Watts? We have 2 minutes for that, please.
My question was going to be about the Alamo. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is there something we as citizens can do? That's really appears to be a really sneaky move because it's getting almost no publicity. When you mention it to people, they look at you and say, nuh-uh. And a little bit of research, and yes, it is true. It is going on. So if you could help us out there, we'll help you.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, get mad, number one. Get mad about it. We deserve to be mad about this. The city of San Antonio has essentially ownership of 4 Spanish mission sites plus the Alamo Plaza. The General Land Office has the chapel, what we think of as the Alamo. The General Land Office seems to be supporting this, which is makes me dismayed at that effort. They view it as simply some sort of tourism designation. That's not the case. It's a horrible invitation for the UN to influence how we preserve the Alamo. So it's happening. It is kind of sneaky and under the radar. We need to call the city of San Antonio, call the General Land Office, and here's one thought I'll leave you with. There's a book UNESCO publishes, a site manager's guide for managers of World Heritage sites. In the foreword, the opening paragraph, the head of UNESCO in 2002, maybe the same fellow, I don't know now, but the head of UNESCO said, the fundamental belief of this World Heritage Program is that these sites belong to all of us, meaning all nations. No way. It belongs to Texas. We paid for it in blood. And that's the key difference.
I'm Pastor Irvin Light, and I'd like to ask you if you will continue that fight not only for the Alamo, but all of the public parks that are in the state of Texas.
Yeah, certainly the constitutional duty of the land commissioner is for public land, and that is not Texas Parks and Wildlife. But I'll use every opportunity I have to raise awareness and speak out. We need to know about it. We need to get mad. We need to get busy. Thank you. Good question.
Okay, if there's no further questions at this time, if you'll go ahead.
Wait a minute.
Oh, Roy, you need to get up there quicker.
Well,
I know your arm's been bad, but your legs are good.
Irvin stole my thunder.
Oh, okay.
I worked at Parks and Wildlife for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
We never got much help from the land office in getting funds. Would you join with those people trying to get enough additional funding to keep our parks going?
I would sure take an interest in the Parks and Wildlife. I think the funding, the Texas Parks and Wildlife falls under the sort of the arm of the governor. But I'd be a real champion. I love the national parks. I love the state parks. And you'd have a friend in the General Land Office.
We need friends.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for your work.
Okay, for your closing, Mr. Watson?
Yes, be happy. So let me say, there's sort of an elephant in the room, and that is that there's 2 Republicans in the Republican primary. Some of you know who my opponent is, the big name. I am not a Bush. I am David Watts. Texans do not believe in family political dynasties. We can appreciate the things the Bush family has done. But all around the state, I hear we've had enough of the Bushes for now. We need new leadership from outside the system. I have no connection to Austin. I have no connection to D.C. I work for you. That's the way it should be. So we can all appreciate some things the Bush family's done, but we need new blood, new leadership. We need bold leadership, not a temporary sort of placeholder that is angling for a higher office. I've had a great career. Thank you so much. I've had a great career. I want to go do this work and do it in an outstanding way. And then I'll be quite happy to go back and make some more money in my little career on the side. So thank you all so much. It's wattsfortexas.org. wattsfortexas.org. David Watts. And really appreciate you giving me a few minutes this evening. Thank you.
And I would like to say that Mr. Watts came up to me a while ago and indicated that he is leaving from here to drive straight to Beaumont to be at another meeting tomorrow, but he did not want to pass up Llano Tea Party.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, the next one will be for Attorney General, Mr. Tom Glass.
I'm Tom Glass. I'm a Libertarian running for Attorney General. I'm running
because I love liberty. I love the Constitution that's designed to protect liberty. I love America and Texas, which were conceived in liberty. And I think all of those are in danger of being gone if we don't do something quickly about it. The status quo will not hold. I've often heard it said, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. I think those people are optimists. I think if we keep on doing what we've always done, the trends we're on is we're going to lose our prosperity and we're going to lose our liberty. And I think the primary way we're losing it is because the federal government continues to grow and grow and grow beyond the bounds of the Constitution. The fundamental problem we face as a country is that no one is enforcing the supreme law of the land. I'm running for Attorney General. That position in Texas is the Chief Legal Officer of Texas. And I believe the Chief Legal Officer of Texas should honor his oath to the Constitution. And when he sees the supreme law of the land being violated in Texas, he should take every action possible within the limits of the power of his office to make sure that those violations of the Constitution by federal officers stop. Some people say that, the way we are going to save our liberty and our Constitution is by going to the Supreme Court. I think nothing can be further from the truth. In fact, the current occupant of this office of the Attorney General, Greg Abbott, says, I go to work, I sue the federal government, I go home. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I haven't noticed the Supreme Court saving our liberty lately. And in fact, the most prominent case that Greg Abbott took recently to the Supreme Court was to try to stop the unconstitutional Obamacare. How did that work for us? It didn't. To paraphrase Ronald Reagan about government, the Supreme Court is not the solution. It is part of the problem. I went late in life to law school. I started at 45, went at night with my company paying for it, and I finished when I was 50 years old. And one of the things I was shocked when I went to constitutional law class to learn is we didn't study the Constitution. What we studied in reality was the way over the last century the Supreme Court has gutted the limits on federal power that was designed into the Constitution. The Supreme Court is not our friend. And in fact, if you read the Constitution, they're not supreme. If you look at the Supremacy Clause says that it is the Constitution and laws in pursuance thereof that's supreme. It's not the federal government. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say who the final arbiter of constitutional meaning is, but right after the Supremacy Clause, in the very next paragraph, it says who they expect to support it. They require every person who takes the oath that becomes a member of the government, whether it's state or federal, any branch, law enforcement, military, to swear an oath to support the Constitution. I presume that most of you have. All right, I'm out of time, so let me go ahead and take questions.
Okay, at this time we will entertain any questions for Mr. Glass. Yes.
Yes. How do you propose to stop this juggernaut that the federal government is forcing on us on a daily basis?
Yes, you enforce the supreme law of the land in Texas. If something, for instance, Obamacare, okay, they say that you have to pay a tax or a fee if you don't purchase a private product from a private individual. Completely unconstitutional. If the feds come in, which in the branch of the feds that are going to do this and to try to enforce that is the IRS. If they come and say, you have to pay or we're sending you to jail, and that's not in pursuance with the Constitution, the act that they're taking is null and void. The term for what I'm talking about comes from null and void. It's called nullification. It says if you feds engage in an unconstitutional act and you're null and void, you're not operating under proper law. That means, in all likelihood, you're violating Texas law. The IRS, if they come and seize your assets because you didn't pay something that's unconstitutional, are engaging in theft. And they should be arrested by our law enforcement and tried and convicted in our courts for doing so. So that's the general approach. Nullification in general, and honoring your oath to the Constitution, enforcing the Constitution, is a spirit of resistance to unconstitutional acts. It is It's a reliance upon independent judgment, reading the text for yourself, thinking for yourself, using your own judgment about what the founders intended, and then taking action to honor your oath to the Constitution and defend it. That's what nullification and the approach I'm talking about is. Yes.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Okay, I applaud what you're saying and agree with you wholeheartedly. My question to you is just what mechanism do you see to resist the federal government in this issue? Basically, you're saying, well, the state needs to stand between the federal government and the individual. Are you going to call out the Texas Rangers to stand between federal troops? I mean, how do you propose this?
Well, yeah, the answer to this is the other term used for this concept that the founders envisioned, Jefferson and Madison in particular, they use the word nullification and they also use the word interposition. Interposition stands for the concept of the state official interposing themselves between the federal tyrant and the citizens to protect them. I don't know about you, but when the feds come to try to get my guns, for instance, I don't want to do it all by myself up against it. I do want the Texas Rangers and my constitutional sheriff on my side. And I want the full weight of Texas law enforcement and the people of Texas standing with me to try to stand against the Constitution. And that's why I'm running, because I want to be the person that is in a key position in the state of Texas will embody the spirit of resistance, encourage our local constitutional sheriffs to resist unconstitutional law, work with the governor to get that, work with the law enforcement within the attorney general, and push back on feds. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions on that, but you do have 1 minute for conclusion.
Thank you. One of the questions people ask me is, why don't you run as a Republican? Well, I used to be a Republican. I went to the state convention in 2008 with my wife, who you'll hear from later. And I was appalled at the way, as I watched over time, I kept getting good promises from the guys that were running for office. They would tell me what I wanted to hear, but I ended up feeling like I was Charlie Brown and they were Lucy, because they ended up always pulling that ball out from underneath it. They never delivered on the limited government. Republicans have been in power for more than 20 years, every statewide elected office. And I ask you, do we have a smaller government and more limited government today than we did 20 years ago? We do not. Are we less in debt in Texas than we were 20 years ago? We are not. Is the Constitution honored more today in Texas than it was 20 years? We are not. And so I've decided, just like the people who left the Democratic Party and started a new party, the Republicans, so many years ago, to try to get their country and their Constitution back, I'm now working in a new party that is designed to do that, the Libertarian Party. I hope you will join me in that fight to restore our liberty and our Constitution, because we have a country to save. Thank you.
And before we move on, I will say that there are 5 candidates for the Office of Attorney General running. We will now go to the governor, and we will have Mr. Belt.
Hello, everybody. Y'all are about to get a lot more libertarianism thrown at you between me and Ms. Glass. So I'm Robert Bell, and I am a recovering Republican.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm with Mr. Glass in that I was a Republican, and I got tired of the lies from limited government, and then they just keep encroaching and choking you with it. So, and then the Democrats don't seem to be doing much better at that, and said that they're worse. So my goal for governor is to leave you all alone, let you live your lives, love your loved ones, and do what we can to be the #1 state in this country. Thank you.
We have Kathie Glass.
What can I say in 3 minutes? Well, let's see. Just give me a show of hands here. Who's comfortable with America dying and taking Texas with it, and Wendy Davis is Texas governor? I don't give many takers on that. Well, let me try this. Who's okay with America dying and taking Texas with it, and Greg Abbott is Texas governor? Is that any better? No, it's not. I'm Kathie Glass, and I want to be your next governor because I've got a plan, I've got a way where America doesn't die. Or if it does, it doesn't take Texas with it. But we've got to have a leader to do this. What is the problem? Well, Washington is broken. The two-party system is corrupt and broken. Neither will fix itself and cannot be reformed from within. If we're going to save our Constitution, our liberty, and our country, we got to chart a new course, away from Washington, outside the two-party system. We got to have a governor who has a plan, who has a vision of this federal tyranny that has destroyed us and is coming at us even more. A governor with vision and a plan to defeat that tyranny and the guts to see it through. I and I alone in this race have all three. I'd like to tell you about my plan for Texas independence. No, it's not secession. And it's nullification. It's a way that it's a multifaceted plan that I'd love to tell you more about, and I'd love to tell you more about nullification and what it is and how it works. But you have to have a leader at the top that can lead the way, who understands it, who gets it, who lives it. I'm that person. How did this fall to me? How did that happen? That I, Kathie Glass, has the weight of the world on my shoulders because I want to be Texas governor because it is the most powerful office on the face of the earth. Anyone who doesn't see it that way shouldn't be seeking the office. In these days, with this tyranny coming at us, we have to work together because we can defeat it, but we can't do this alone. My plan for Texas independence has many facets, but it looks toward that day when Washington is not just broken, but collapsed. And everything we have come to depend on from Washington, including 40% of our Texas budget, is gone. We don't have a functioning currency. What do? How do we survive? Well, we can. And this is part of it. I'm not turning my back on America. No, we're taking our country back. And we're doing it one state at a time, starting with Texas, and with me as Texas governor. So I ask you to join with me. We've got a big fight on our hands. We can do this, but we have to work together, and we have to have the right leadership with vision, plan, and guts. Thank you.
Okay, we are now opening, we have 4 minutes for questions from the floor, please.
I would like to direct my question to Kathie. In spite of what the way this may sound, I do appreciate what you're talking about a great deal, and I can support that. My question is, if it comes down to you, Greg Abbott, and Wendy Davis, and you successfully take 30% of the vote, or 25% of the conservative vote, and leave Greg Abbott with 25%, and Kathie Davis, because I know the Democrats are coming in here. Wendy Davis, I'm sorry. They're coming in here real strong. They're bringing in all their guns and all their money. And so, if we're not careful here, we're going to end up with Wendy Davis. And I think that could be about as dramatic a mistake as we could possibly make. I want to know what your solution is.
My solution is to vote for me, make me the leader, because it doesn't matter. Rick Abbott, Wendy Davis, it doesn't matter. We're going down. We're losing our liberty. It doesn't matter. I'm the only one that is talking this way, so I guess I must be the only one who sees it. Greg Abbott's got, what, $40–60 million in the bank. We'll find out in a few days. That tells you all you need to know about him, and it's not good. Nobody with $40 million gives it, except they know he is bought and paid for, and he will do what they will get a good return on their investment. So we're going down. Does it matter how fast we go down or how hard we hit the bottom when this thing collapses? I'm offering a plan that will work, a plan that but we have to take this step. Greg Abbott is for stealing our water through Prop 6. He's for stealing our land through the eminent domain. He is against our liberty. We will lose it one way or another. I'm the only one offering a realistic opportunity to not lose our liberty. And so I'm saying vote, and let me add this too. In a serious three-way race, 51% is not the magic number, it's 34. 34%. That changes the dynamics, that turns everything upside down. So that is my path, that I can win this and take this thing, but I know I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't even think those thoughts about what happens if this and this and this. I know as long as I do what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know that I am, and I do the best job I can, the results are not up to me.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any, okay, we have one more room for one more question.
I just would like to know if you would pardon anyone who was convicted of using alternate currency, because that's one of the ways in the future that we can kind of get out from under the Washington, D.C. juggernaut, is by using silver and gold and becoming actually financially independent. And liberals like Charles Schumer have actually said that if you use an alternate currency, you should be considered a terrorist. And yeah, things such as Bitcoin, gold, or silver. And I just wanted to know if you see that as kind of a way that Texas can actually pursue its own independence.
May I ask who you're directing your question to?
Libertarian candidate for governor.
We had two. Mr. Bell? Mr. Bell be okay?
Mrs.
Both? Oh. Y'all have both minutes.
Yeah, no problem with using alternate forms of currency. Just learned about Bitcoin. It's pretty interesting. Ron Paul has his own Bitcoin. It's actually doing very well on the marketplace there. If you want to make some money, check it out. My 401k is all all mostly gold and silver because A, I'm young enough right now, but B, the price was going up and it's still going up. So I don't see how using gold or silver or anything else is going to, we used to barter with cows, chickens, so I don't see a problem with using any, as long as the other person is willing to accept it as payment, sure.
Texas governor actually has limited pardon powers, but I get your main point. Part of my plan for Texas independence is to take care of and foresee what happens when we don't have a functioning currency. And part of that is, well, the Constitution says two things about gold and silver in states. It says states shall not accept anything other than gold or silver as payment for debt. Well, we do that all the time. We can start enforcing that. Property taxes, it's gold, it's silver. But it also says that a state cannot coin its own money. Well, other states have gotten around that by saying this private entity over here is minting the Texas Lone Star coin, and that's what we are going to use for currency here. So that's exactly what we have to foresee and work around. And it's another power of the governor in Texas is line item veto. Even the president doesn't have that power. That's pretty powerful. If I see an agency that has enough money to go around and prosecute people for using alternate currencies, I'd say that's an agency that's got too much money.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Each of you now have a 1 minute summary.
Ronald Reagan said there comes a point in time and space and beyond time and space which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. Duty, that's a four-letter word you don't hear too much about anymore, but I'm all about duty. And nobody likes it now, but I bet those men at the Alamo didn't like what they had to do, but they knew their duty and they did it. I said, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and that's why, like the men at the Alamo, I will never retreat, never surrender. I'm in this for the long term. I will not withdraw. I will not flinch. I will not stand down. I will stand up to the federal government, leading nullification. And yes, it may be at the Alamo. Wouldn't that be a historic event? That once again, we are doing what Texans have shown that they can do. We can do it again. We can face down a federal tyrant and change the course of history. Thank you.
Comedian George Carlin used to say in one of his acts was, we don't have a Bill of Rights, we have a bill of permissions. That anything that can be taken away from you is not a right, it's a permission. I'm here to fight for our rights so no one can take them away from us. Our rights to our guns, our rights to our land, and all. I love Texas. I've been here from 89 when my family moved here. So, and I haven't left, and I don't want to leave. So yeah, so robertbell2014.com, if you would, appreciate it. Thank you.
And we're just almost coming to the conclusion. We only have 2 more areas, but I would like to let you know that there are 10 candidates running for governor. Okay, we now have one candidate, Mr. Wade Brown for the U.S. House.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Wade Brown. I'm running for U.S. House against our current incumbent, Mike Conaway. I'd like to start off with thanking the organizers for putting this together. It takes time and energy to do that. None of us candidates would have the opportunity to do this if something like this wasn't put together by people who are dedicated to doing things like that. So I appreciate it. I'm deeply grateful to be able to be here. I would like to also introduce to you all my mom and my dad. It's Johnny K. Brown, and show them the honor that they deserve. They were wonderful parents for my brothers and I, and I love them, and appreciate y'all doing that. I'd also like to introduce my son Samuel Brown. He's currently a freshman at Texas Tech, and he's the eldest of my 4 children. My wife Sarah, whom I've been married to for 22 years, could not be here this evening because she's spending time with our other 3. I've got Abigail, who's 15, and she's in ballet this evening. Clara, who's 13, and she's a manager for the junior high basketball team. And Ollie, age 9, who just kind of is there. So the rest of my family couldn't be here, but I thank you, Mom and Dad, for showing up, Sam for coming with them. And I'll damage the reputation of the Tuckers by saying that Mr. Leon Tucker and his wife and my mom and dad go way back. They worked for GTE together years and years ago, and so we actually have some folks we know in the area. Time goes quick when you're doing something like this, so I hope you'll ask me a bunch of questions. But I'll tell you why I'm running. I'm running because we have a House member. He's not a bad man. I wouldn't point the finger at him and say there's something wrong with his character. But I'll tell you this, it's a fact. He's voted for over $3 trillion of debt limit increases since he's been in office. Now that's just a fact. That's not including the most recent piece of legislation that had to do with spending, which is the Bipartisan Budget Act. Also, there's something that's even more important than that. The thing that got me running the first time was I was in my campaign actually began in a very unusual place. It began in Djibouti, Africa. That's where I was deployed. I was there as a Marine Corps major, and at the time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an admiral by the name of Mike Mullen, said out loud in front of everyone, "Our national debt has become our greatest national security threat." When the senior most officer, military officer in the land says that, it means we have a problem, and I began to investigate what was going on. But we have an even bigger problem right now, frankly, and that is, and I don't mind saying it out loud, I don't think you do either. We have a president who is a socialist. He is a socialist. Let me quote Barack Obama for you. "My individual salvation is dependent upon our collective salvation." That's a quote, and he said it more than once. Ladies and gentlemen, the import of a statement like that is that he believes that each one of us is a part of his collective, and that his role, therefore, is to save us and to save himself. So we're in a dangerous state as a country. We're in a very crucial time in our history. The incumbent, unfortunately, he's been there for 5 terms. He's refused to bring up articles of impeachment against even people like Eric Holder. He's refused to consider censure. We've just got to have, look at us. Look at us in this room. We're Texans. We're Texans, and we need to stand up for ourselves. And we need a representative who will go up to the Capitol building and stand for us in a bold way. So I'm going to close my comments there. Please ask me questions. I have lots of specifics I can discuss with you, and I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes for questioning. And who is the first? Do we have a question? Bill?
I certainly have one regarding the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. There's 2 sections in that that still are valid, and I've had conversations with our congressman about them, that these provisions allow the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens for whatever reason or no reason by the President of the United States. What would you do to suspend those provisions?
Well, of course, once those provisions become law, it becomes very difficult for a congressman to take any sort of individual action. But you speak to a bill that I've addressed in writing on my blog, because I didn't talk a lot about my qualifications, but those of you who have taken the time to do a little bit of research, you know that I'm a major in the Marine Corps Reserve, that I spent over a dozen years on active duty, that I deployed 3 times, and then I'm a combat veteran. And the NDAA had several problems, Mr. Hussey. One of them was that it did grant to the President another authorization for the use of military force that allowed him to indefinitely detain people at his discretion. It's written that way in the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Conaway voted for that bill. He voted to give that kind of authority to this President. Why? Because it was tied to defense spending. When are our congressmen, when is our Republican-led House going to stand up and force bills to be distinguished? Basically, is this a defense spending bill, or is this an authorization for the use of military force? So thank you for the question. I think I would like to think that we can take an action against everything that's going wrong up there. The way to overcome something like that is like you have to do in our House. 435 members. You've got to build a coalition of like-minded constitutional conservatives who will basically introduce legislation to undo the NDAA as it's written. That's the way to go about doing it. That's the option we have as a representative.
Okay, this will be the last question, and you have 1 minute to answer.
Would you take up the initiative of term limits for congressmen? I think we've got way too many people up there, been there way too long, and act in their own interests and not in ours.
I completely agree with your premise that we have people that have been there too long. But no, and I'll tell you why I don't think that I'm not going to spend energy on term limits. It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. The situation that we're in as a nation, if you look in this room again, we tend to look at ourselves as not being very powerful. We have become almost cynical. But there's one thing, there's an assumption I think I can make about you, and that is that you're here because you haven't given up on your country. You haven't given up yet. You're still willing to fight. Now, what does it have to do with term limits? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with term limits. Until we change our culture, and we get enough people involved so that you don't have to worry about a term limit, you have enough people who are paying attention to vote people out. That's the answer. If you make the Constitution to just expel people from office, you're asking the law to do what the framers wanted individual citizens to do. So.
Okay, very quick question, very quick answer. I don't want to leave you just standing there. Okay.
As you mentioned when you started, you talked about the new bipartisan budget, and as we've seen this last thing that got passed, we had our own veterans benefits taken away for those disabled veterans. What would you do? What could you do?
Well, obviously, craft legislation that reinstates those things. One of the reasons that those things, the defense sequestration that recently happened, most people don't realize that was part of something called the Budget Control Act of 2011. The Budget Control Act of 2011 basically not only approved additional humongous, in excess of $1 trillion of debt limit increases, but it also set up automatic cuts for defense spending. Who would vote for such a thing? Well, the incumbent did. Mike Conaway, the fiscal conservative, as he calls himself. Again, I have nothing against his character. I don't understand his voting pattern. The bottom line is when we all believe that, I think, that one of the primary reasons that the federal government is in existence and why we as states all banded together was so that we could share the responsibility of our defense. So naturally, I'm going to be in favor of making our defense the best in the world, and that includes taking care of the troops. So I think that's a responsibility that we have, and it's a sacred responsibility. I'm not just saying that because I've worn the uniform, but because that's just the way it is. It's the truth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brady, you have 1 minute for conclusion. Quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the questions that's asked, and it's a valid one, is how can you hope to win? Mike Conaway has spent $1.2 million in the last election. How can you hope to take on this guy as a 5-term incumbent? I have a very simple 3-step plan, but it requires your participation. Not even a lot of your participation, just a little bit. The 3 steps are be one, bring one, and give 11. Be a voter. Come out and vote again. Bring a voter with you that did not vote last time. Between Chris Johnson and I last time, we had over 20,000 votes in this district. If we pool those resources together, if the constitutional conservatives come out again, we'll have over 40,000 votes. That's enough for a majority. The third thing is to give just $11 for the 11th district. And do it right now. Do it today, before you leave this building, if you can. Give $11 for this campaign. It's not a lot, but when you've got 20,000 people who are willing to vote for someone besides the incumbent, if they each give just a little bit, that's how we have to take our country back. Not through a massive sacrifice of individual persons, but through a little bit of sacrifice working together. So I appreciate your support. I thank you for hanging out this long into the evening. I will stay here as long as necessary to talk to as many of you as want to talk to me about any of the issues or my viewpoints. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are in our last category. Oh, incidentally, there are only 2 people in the U.S. House running, and that is Mr. Conaway and Mr. Brown. We now have the last area. It's called the U.S. Senate, and we have 3 candidates, and we'll have at this time up first is Mr. Mapp.
How are y'all? Good. I don't need this. That's the good news. I like to walk when I talk. I like to visit, connect a little bit. My name is Chris Mapp, and I'm 53 years old. I was born and raised in Texas. I have 4 children. 1 is in the military today. 1 served in Fallujah, came back in one piece. I couldn't be any more thankful. I'm going to tell you why I'm running, and I'll tell you a little bit more about me, but I want to tell you why I'm running. That's the most critical part. Just like my dad taught me, and your fathers teach your sons, and your grandfather taught you, just like my grandfather taught my dad. You have one obligation in this country, that if you do not serve in the military, your obligation is to go vote. Your obligation is to research that candidate. Your obligation is to pool your resources, support that candidate, and go vote. Pull the lever, get out the pen, punch the button, whatever it takes. And then after we vote, we hold our head up high, we hold our chest out, and we went and did our American duty. And then we go back to paying our taxes, raising our families, watching our businesses, working on our future. We go back to what life is. We go back to all the things that it takes to make a daily life work. We expect our representation to go to Washington, to go wherever they're supposed to be, and to fight for us and watch our backs while we live our life, and we do what the Constitution says we have the opportunity to do, and that is we have the opportunity to succeed or fail on our own. We're not guaranteed the outcome of life, but our representation has failed us. My voting apparently has not quite worked out the way I would like for it to. My opponent is John Cornyn. These 2 fellows are not my opponent. These 2 fellows want to see the same change I want to see. We might tackle it differently, we might handle it differently, but the bottom line is this country is headed for a cliff. We're in the most perilous position I've ever seen in my life, and I'm not going to give it up for my kids and my grandkids just because a socialist, communistic approach is being taken to this country and our leadership is being quiet and they're not standing up and fighting. Here's what I will tell you. If you love 21 hours of Ted Cruz and green eggs and ham, standing up and telling you that this country's on fire and the worst legislation was coming down the pike, I will tell you, if you like green eggs and ham, you will love me, Sam I am. My name is Chris Mapp. I'm a candidate for U.S. Senate. I come from the ground floor of life. I've had a job since I was 16. I was out of school in the 10th grade. I have no higher education. Everything I've done on my own. I've got a lot of college hours, but my hours are technical schools. My hours are technical trades. And we need more of that today. I would appreciate your vote on March the 4th.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Yeary.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Reid Reasor. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, and I am running for the United States Senate. And I'd like to echo some of the things here. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to thank Major Brown for being a Marine. Everywhere I go, when I'm the president of the Marine, I thank the Marine because the first thing they do is they talk about honor first, then they talk about the job. And we can do that in our schools too. We don't need to ram religion down our kids, but we can talk about honor. And I appreciate that. I want to thank Ms. Dawson, Ms. Carlson, Ms. Ellis, and Mr. Davis. When I run around the GOP, I find out who really runs the GOP, and that's grandmothers. So thank you, ladies. If you want to take our country back, that's how to do it right here, is what you ladies are doing, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Llano, for that. I want to talk a little bit about myself, and I'm going to talk about my opponent. I'm going to talk about my top 5. I'm Reid Reasor, and I'm not from Texas. I apologize. I was born in Pennsylvania, in a rural area, industrial area. I made it here as quick as I could. I really tried. But I went to the Air Force Academy first. I got a bachelor's in astrophysics. I went to pilot training. I fought on 3 different continents under 4 different presidents flying fighters. My first combat operation was in Nicaragua in 1987 when we actually killed godless communists. I kind of bring that up to my liberal buddies and they kind of get a little cold-hearted because I think I'm serious. But actually I might kind of be serious in a little bit. But anyway, I've been around, and I wanted to add what Mr. Poole had to say here, why we are great. I've been around the world many times, and everywhere I go, I hear praises for us. The most foreign studied document in the history of the world outside of religious text is the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights, for 2 very special reasons, on top of your ability to have a civil trial, is that the federal government may never take power that we do not justly yield to it. Never been tried before. It goes back to Greek, Romans. They tried it once, but Caesars took power and they never gave it back. So we are the experiment in that. The second one is our inalienable Bill of Rights. I want to make sure everybody understands. The Senate has no power to take it. Congress has no power to take it. The Supreme Court has no power, or the President. Even if all of those 500 people get together and said, we're going to take the 4th Amendment, they legally have no power to do so. They are only the supreme power in what we have yielded and ratified. I'd like you to read Article 5 in the 10th Amendment. Everything they're doing to violate our Bill of Rights is illegal. And it does require nullification. I thank you, governors, for talking about that. Why I'm running? Well, let me step back. I'm a small business owner. I did work a couple years in a PhD in an educational program. But why I'm running against Cornyn for 3 reasons. He did not stand up against Obama. He has not stood up against the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 14th, and 27 amendments that are gone. Article 1, 5, and 10, gone. That needs to be stopped. Our own opponent is big government spending. He voted for every bill to increase spending, every debt limit increase, and every expansion to remove your Bill of Rights, including the NDAA twice. I'm out of time, but I'm going to talk a little bit later if I can about my top 5, but the last one is that this man violated his oath of office, and if you violate your oath of office, you are a domestic threat to the Constitution, and that is why I'm standing up against John Cornyn.
I was an officer in the Air Force. I made my living as a computer professional, and I'm best known as a constitutional historian. I'm the founder and president of the Constitution Society, whose website is constitution.org. On that website, I've assembled almost all of the significant works on constitutional history, law, and government. If you have a constitutional question, you can find the material on that site you need to decide the question. The office for which I'm contending is critical. It may be the case that the U.S. Senate and the Congress makes a decision that triggers another world depression, perhaps far worse than any we've seen before. And you remember the last time that happened, it led to a global war, which this time would probably be nuclear. The stakes are huge. And looking at what is happening in Congress now, you have to ask yourselves, what are the odds that they're going to get it right? And what kind of people do we need to elect to that office who might get it right? Now, if you go to my website, johnrowland.net, you'll find something you won't find on most of the candidate websites. Specifics. Most of the candidates advised by campaign professionals will just give you broad generalities. The campaign consultants will tell you, don't get specific. All that will get you is criticism and not much support. Well, I happen to believe that at this time in our history, we have to appeal to the intelligence of the American people. If they don't rise to that challenge, then they will suffer the consequences, as will we all. But I have to at least do my part by offering specifics. And what you will find there is a fairly long list of legislation. These are bills that are ready to go. All I have to do is change the dates and sign them. Drop them in the hopper, they're ready to go. They cover most of the issues that confront us today. Have you ever wondered why anyone hasn't just stood up to new gun control legislation? Why they don't just repeal it? Well, the repeals are there. Go to that website and see what other candidates besides myself need to be doing.
We will now be open for questions, and we have 6 minutes in which to have questions and answer it, okay? Bill?
Right, I'll go again. Polls show most voters don't think government works. What would you do to fix the underlying structures and systems that seem to be broken? It addresses all of them.
Sir, I think I agree with you, and this is where part of my issue with Senator Cornyn is outside of advice and consent, the senator's job, other than protecting Texas and making sure they stay out of our waterways, making sure our gas and oil is on our own, and enforce the border, is the senator has to lead in social issues. So he needs to stand up and talk about what central control does to kill. And if you wanted a great model of what the government is trying to accomplish, central control over the people, just look at the education system. It's gone from first in the 1960s to the worst while spending the most. So if you're going to go from first to worst while spending the most, you're either incompetent, you're doing it intentionally, or you just don't understand that control kills. Creativity, curiosity, innovation, and motivation, just the foundations of our success. So when they're trying to control, they will destroy it. So we need to have a senator that is enough to evangelize social issues, be a historian of social issues, like some of these gentlemen are, and step out and oppose this agenda. Then stand up for the law. When the central government of the United States, when you stand and look at Harry Reid and you go, sir, you are about to take an illegal vote. I want to make sure you understand what you are about to do. You are voting against Article 5. You may not take the Bill of Rights. You may propose an amendment that goes with 2/3 and 2/3. That goes out to the states for 3/4 ratification. But what you're about to do is a legal vote. And a constitutional crisis is probably what needs to happen at the Senate level. My approach is slightly different than others. I believe the crisis at the federal level. Dwayne Stonewall is a fantastic man. You might want to have a chance to look at him. His approach is more from the state, working through the legislation level up that way. So these guys have proposals too that are great, but that's how I would tackle it. Sorry, too much time.
need to repeat the question, but. All right, let me say this. I'll answer this very quickly and very shortly. Do you know that the word no never killed anybody? We need to say no a lot more. We need to simply not give up and compromise our convictions. We're spending too much, we're giving too much, and we have a nation of takers that's taking too much. The word no is not a bad word.
Among the bills on my site include a large number of structural and procedural reforms, which I invite you to examine in some detail. For example, I have a better approach to trying to balance the budget than a so-called balanced budget amendment, which would not work. It is a procedure by which the budget is developed in stages that makes it easy to block unbalanced budgets at each stage along the way. That's the way to get it done. One of the key reforms that are needed is to repeal the legal tender acts, which make Federal Reserve notes legal tender for the payment of debts. But this needs to also be matched at the state level. Do you know, for example, that in the state of Texas, there is no statute declaring anything legal tender? And it would be very helpful if there were. So we need to work with officials at all stages of government to restructure our government, our economy, and everything else so that it becomes manageable to the extent that it can be manageable. And there are limits to how manageable it is. Most of our opponents seek to do things that imagine that they are more capable of managing our public affairs than in fact they are. Some things have to be left to take their natural course.
Okay, thank you very much. We now have 1 minute for summary.
Okay, again, my name is Reid Reasor, Colonel Reasor for U.S. Senate. I'd like to tell you why I'm different. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm a scientist, and I can tell you why that solar power will never work, and I can tell you why exactly that these green energies are not going to work. And I can tell you also why global warming is a lie, and it is used to wipe out our industry to cause inner city decay. Also, my oath is written in blood. My first loss was when I was 23, and 11 of my friends burned to death. And so, 23 other of my friends, 700,000 people have died for the Bill of Rights. It's written in blood. You just can't go and take it away. We fought the Civil War to extend the Bill of Rights to everybody. So these oaths are written in blood, and we need to take it that way. The other thing is I'm not a rich man. I'm not a millionaire. I don't take any money. I don't take any PAC money, campaign money, or corporate money. Never will. The only people that fund me are Mom and Pa, giving me gas money so I can haul my wife Heidi around. Thanks, Heidi. So you can find me. And if you're not going to vote for me, I ask you to look for somebody other than our current senator. I ask you to look for Stovall, Chris, or Dawn. There are people out there, and how you can win, how you can help, is you can do two things, and I agree with this, is how we're going to take power away from the millionaires and the power brokers is your inbox. Hey, here's this Reid Reasor guy. Forward. Go to his website, take a look. Or here's Don, or here's Dwayne. There's an alternative. We'll force a runoff. We're not going to beat him in the primary. That's not the objective. The objective is to force a runoff so we can have a conversation. And we can defeat him.
You know, on my cards I had printed, I wanted to take my very top 3 platforms because it's hard in a setting like this to talk about everything you want to talk about. On my card, on the very back, very top, it says, God bless America. This country turned its back on God, nothing else counts. We're done. Number 2, spending is out of control. We're printing money at such an alarming rate. We're taking this same money, we're paying for the debt that was created by the printed money that we just printed. 1929 will be a bump in the road, friends. The reason I really am running is because we have two choices, I see it. 2014 and 16 are the last stands for conservatives as I see it in our generation. I will also tell you the two choices are not very pretty. Every household in America has it. Everybody has a briefcase and everybody has a gun case. The gun case has a negative effect, but we will protect our liberty at all costs. The briefcase means you get involved and you make that difference before you have to think about the second alternative. Number two, entitlements. They have to be done with. It's too much. And I have to stop right here, but the last one, immigration. I am an absolute no amnesty guy. I'd appreciate your vote on March the 4th. My name is Chris Mapp.
Let's suppose by some miracle that I got elected and took office. It could happen. Then what? Okay, I would introduce all that great legislation, which again I invite you to study and urge other candidates to also adopt it. I don't care if they copy my stuff. I don't have a copyright on it. But the problem is that if I were to do that, I would be immediately isolated in the Senate. Nobody would return my phone calls. All right? That's the way things work in Washington. So electing me would only be the first step. The solutions would then depend on everyone else getting after every other member of Congress, and of course the President, to take supportive action on the things that I am proposing or that might be proposed along the same lines. I don't claim to have all the answers or to have perfect answers. My proposals are the beginning of a conversation, but I run them by a lot of people, a lot of experts, and most of them say that I'm far, far ahead of anyone else in the field. It's time for the rest of the country to get caught up.
Thank you all very much. I would like to say before Patricia closes, as standing up here, I would like to say that I think we had a very, very good forum with all the candidates that they came up here. I think we should give them a great hand. And they'll be happy to stay and talk with you. There's another thing that I would like to say in standing up here, and I have stood in some of these places before, but I want to say this is one of the best audiences I have ever seen in a long, long time. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the candidates again. We know that you have given up a lot of your time and resources to get here, and we appreciate it a great deal. Do not leave until we get the room cleaned up. You may turn your cell phones back on. You're adjourned.